Hello everyone, this is Kumar Abhinav and you all are watching CLAT Gurukul's YouTube channel. This is Editorial Explainer series where I take up some editorials from the Hindu or the Indian Express and discuss it in detail, at the same time provide you with some pointers which you can retain, and it will help you in understanding just the general affairs that are going around in this world. Now, as we all know, editorial mostly have articles which are currently relevant or which has some significance in terms of our competitive examination preparation and in all other senses. So it becomes very imperative then to understand the affairs in much detail, to know about the facts and substances involved, and to then retain it as well for the examination purpose. And for that, and with that intention, I have started this kind of a class where I try take up articles from all the aspects, be it international affair, domestic affair. But some of the editorials or some of the articles will always be from the legal section or having some relation with the legal section, because of the fact ultimately we are preparing for CLAT examination. That is the ultimate goal here. At the same time, students, I would like to just advise those students who are concerned about the pointers that whether this would be enough for GK section. So let me just clarify. This is for your understanding benefit. This is for your understanding. Once you get the concept, once you have an idea what the affairs are all about, it becomes then easier to remember the pointers from that can help you in the MCQ questions. So no, this is not going to be the exhaustive material for current affairs preparation. However, it is very important to go through such videos so as to understand the affairs, and then only you can take the help of any website and then go through the pointers in order to remember it. Now, with that note, I would also like to add that on our website, that is clatgurukul.com, there you will find a section called Current Affairs section, and under that section you will find daily updates of current affairs. So don't forget about it. Go read that daily. There your pointers will be covered, and in this particular video, what I do you all know, and that is breakdown or just discussion of all the important editorials of the day. And with that, let's start today's discussion. The usual course of business. First of all, we'll read a message, and which reads, success is sum of small efforts repeated. Success is sum of small efforts repeated. The notion here is consistency. I mean, hard work, we have heard so many concepts that this is needed for success or that is needed for success. But I think ultimately the thing that matters is consistency. If we cannot put on or put in the same kind of work every day, then there is little chance of getting successful, which might happen in some cases, but there is no guarantee with such an approach. So it would be better if we add up or keep on adding up our efforts over time so that in the end it will yield some result for us. Okay, with that, let's start or let's jump into today's discussion. I will just tell you what are the topics that I picked up today. Firstly, climate solution. This appeared in the Hindu newspaper on page number 6, the editorial. And then where liberalism and nationalism are placed in India. This also appeared in the Hindu newspaper. I'm sorry to suggest climate solution appeared in the Indian Express, while liberalism and nationalism are placed in Asia. This appeared in the Hindu editorial. Apart from that, one more topic I will be covering today, that is related to a recent judgment passed by Mumbai High Court, acquitting a man of rash and negligent driving, where he primarily hit a pedestrian walking or crossing the road while there was no zebra crossing sign allowed. So that was the issue which we'll discuss today. What are the things that are needed? What are the essentials for a crime or for a crime or for an offense rather involving rash and negligent action? We will also get to know about the death caused by rash and negligent action not amounting to culpable homicide. So there you will have some legal understanding as well. But before that, the topics for the day again I'm repeating: climate solution and where liberalism and nationalism are placed in Asia. Okay, starting with the first one, which is how Israel's expertise in climate innovation can help India. Now, this particular article is related to the climate crisis that we are going through, or global warming or greenhouse gas emission. At the same time, it is also written in the wake of AR6, the assessment report 6 by IPCC, under which they have suggested, or rather they have exposed certain nuances in the climate crisis which should be concerning for all of us across the globe. Now, this article is written by Roni Yadida Klein and Lear Asef, and in this article they basically provides us with a solution to deal with this kind of a problem. So in their understanding, what Israel is doing in order to deal with this emission issue and this climate crisis or climate change issue is what every country or is what other countries should take inspiration from. So today in this article, you will get to know the current situation of climate crisis. At the same time, you will also get to know what are the imperative steps that one country needs to take, like Israel. So let's start with first the current crisis, how the crisis have already deepened or have already aggravated to a level where nobody can ignore it at least. So firstly, we have seen several instances. If we start the year, it started with Australian wildfire, but at the same time we have seen similar kind of instances happening across the globe. हमने देखा कैसे बहुत बड़ी बाढ़ आई जर्मनी में, वेस्टर्न यूरोप में। इंडिया में आपने बहुत जगह के न्यूज़ सुने होंगे कि बहुत सारे विलेजेस बह गए मानसून के रेन में, बारिश की पानी में, बाढ़ में। हेलस्टोन्स बहुत, इटली में हेलस्टोन भी गिरे हैं। ब्रिटेन एंड स्विट्जरलैंड की बात करें तो वहां हमने देखा है काफी पर्टिकुलरली सडन वाइल्ड एंड रेनी वेदर है। ब्रिटेन anyway has a rainy weather, but this kind of wild and rainy weather was never the case. But we all have seen this change coming gradually. Then Sardinia, Greece, Turkey, Australia, US and Siberia were hit by widespread fires. कैलिफोर्निया कनाडा की बात करें तो टेम्परेचर वहां पे 50 डिग्री सेल्सियस पहुंच रहा है। ग्लोबल टेम्परेचर की बात करें तो दैट इज एक्सपेक्टेड टू राइज अबाउट 1.2 डिग्री सेल्सियस, and that too of a pre-industrial period. Then ultimately it also gives us the information from IPCC report which shows that the window of opportunity to limit temperature rise to 1.5 degree, अगर हमारे पास कोई window of opportunity है 1.5 degree rise, 1.5 डिग्री सेल्सियस राइज होके टेम्परेचर को उसी लिमिट में रखने का, then there is no particularly practical ways to do it first of all, but that will have the worst impact on climate change in closing. अगर एक 1.5 डिग्री से ज्यादा हमारा क्लाइमेट का जो हमारा जो टेम्परेचर है, the global temperature अगर वो राइज करता है from pre-industrial level, so then that will lead to a dangerous level. Then it would be very inconducive for the human being to survive that kind of a world or with that kind of a crisis. Okay, moving ahead, it then talks about India's concerns related to crisis, and in that it says that as flood and drought will have the severe impact on India's agriculture. Firstly, अब बात करें अगर इंडिया के concerns की, तो इस crisis में सबसे ज़्यादा हम देख रहे हैं flood, irregular floods हैं, और कभी-कभी बिल्कुल बारिश नहीं होती तो उससे जो droughts आ रहे हैं, उससे जो सुखाड़ पड़ रहा है, उससे इंडिया के एग्रीकल्चर सेक्टर को सबसे ज़्यादा सफर करना पड़ रहा है। वाटर रिसोर्सेज हमारे डिप्लीट होते जा रहे हैं, फूड सिक्योरिटी की कोई गारंटी नहीं रह गई है, और रूरल कम्युनिटी की प्रॉस्पेरिटी हम नहीं उम्मीद कर सकते, हम नहीं उस पर बेस कर सकते जब तक कि आपका एग्रीकल्चर का जो पूरा स्ट्रक्चर है वो सुधरे नहीं, जब तक कि हमारा जो क्लाइमेट है वो एक यूनिफॉर्मिटी से फंक्शन नहीं करे। आफ्टर दैट द ऑथर सजेस्टेड इकोनॉमिक डेवलपमेंट हैज बीन द पॉलिसी प्रायोरिटी। अगर हम देखें तो इंडिया के लिए बाकी सारी चीजें नहीं है। आपको याद होगा, मैं बार बार इस चीज को रिपीट करता हूँ कि जब भी बात होती है इमिशन की, इंडिया का आर्ग्यूमेंट होता है कि वी anyway have not emitted that much greenhouse gases because हमारा डेवलपमेंट जो बहुत later on stages में शुरू हुआ है, we have reached into the, or we have entered into this industrial phase very later on, and so जो हमारा कोटा है, जो हमारा क्वोशंट है एमिशन का, हमने उसको फुलफिल नहीं किया। हमारे लिए अभी मेन प्रायोरिटी है कि हम अपने लोगों को कैसे डेवलप करें एंड हाउ वी शुड स्ट्राइव टुवर्ड्स इकोनॉमिक डेवलपमेंट rather than thinking about how to prevent global or how to prevent simply the climate crisis that we all are awaiting. Now after that, lifting millions of people out of poverty. If we talk about India, it has done a tremendous job of pulling out millions of people out of poverty, which then created larger demand for goods. जब आप poverty से लोगों को निकालेंगे, उन्हें middle class की situation में डालेंगे, तो goods की services, goods की demand बढ़ेंगी। हम जानते हैं middle class सबसे बड़ा consumer है, and अगर वो होगा तो it will also increase the demand for energy across all sector. आपको ज़्यादा demand है, आपको ज़्यादा supply करना है, you will need more factories, more human power, more work structure, and in all, or to process all these things, you will have to have electricity. So energy will be wasted, or energy will be used more in the coming time when more people will join this strata of middle class or get out of the poverty. After that, it has said that India had made enormous investment. ऐसा नहीं है कि India is totally ignorant about the renewable energy sources. अगर हम बात करें solar energy में, तो solar energy में India second or third है in the world. Similar things can be said about wind and biomass waste and hydropower energies. So India is already doing a lot in order to control its emission, but at the same time India has some practical problems that the country is facing with, like pulling out its people from the poverty. Ultimately, the author says that, however, all these things are considering all these things, we can still say that there are still enormous challenges in meeting India's demand. अभी भी इंडिया की डिमांड को मीट करने के लिए बहुत ही enormous challenge है कि कैसे इंडिया एनर्जी, फूड और वाटर के डिमांड को मीट करेगा, and that too in a sustainable way. Sustainable way मतलब will meet the demand in a way which will not cause or which will not jeopardize the interest of the coming generation. Now, Now the author mentions about the system in Israel, that how we can take lessons from the Israel. So the author says Israel has learned to establish agriculture in the desert. वो desert में अपना agriculture लगाते हैं arid areas में, और वहाँ पे वो अपनी 90% जो waste water है उसको recycle करते हैं, उसके बाद उसको desalinate करके वो drinking water भी बनाते हैं. जो मतलब आपका waste हो रहा है वो waste होके कहीं भी नहीं जमा हो रहा है, उसको वो ले जा रहे हैं arid area में, ऐसे areas में जो रेगिस्तान का इलाका है, और वहाँ पे जाके वो agriculture उत्पादन करने की सोच रहे हैं with using the same water. It has also developed solution for energy storage, energy efficiency, and renewable energy. It has cultivated a groundbreaking industry of animal protein substitute. एक और बहुत जरूरी चीज है कि इन्होंने एनर्जी एफिशिएंसी, एनर्जी स्टोरेज और रिन्यूएबल एनर्जी को यूज करने का जो सोल्यूशन जो सिस्टम निकाला है इज वेरी एफिशिएंट. एट द सेम टाइम दे हैव कल्टिवेटेड अ ग्राउंड ब्रेकिंग इंडस्ट्री. प्रोटीन सब्स्टिट्यूट्स, प्रोटीन बनाने के लिए जो तरीके होते हैं उसके लिए भी उनके पास बहुत बड़ा और बहुत ही अच्छा एक अनोखा सिस्टम उन्होंने डेवलप किया. प्रॉब्लम यह है कि प्रोटीन सब्स्टिट्यूट्स आर द मेजर सोर्सेज ऑफ ग्रीन हाउस गैस एमिशन. द प्रॉब्लम विद हाउ इट एक्चुअली हैपेंस इज कि in America you must have heard that there are several bigger farms where cows are processed, they are kept there, they graze there, and ultimately they are processed to make beef or to provide the population with beef or enough support of beef, because that is the main protein source in foreign countries. Now let's consider this point कि if that many cows are staying at one place, they will graze on some land, and that land should be grazing land. So it won't have any trees, or it won't have any shrubs. What it will have rather is grass, which the cows can graze. And then they produce, or then they excrete the dung, and that dung has or the dung basically gradually starts releasing the gas methane, which is also greenhouse gas. And that way the whole industry of protein, or the whole protein making industry, is one of the key factors in aggravating the situation of or global warming this further, or accentuating this problem this further. So if you have a different or alternative method to grow or to process protein, that will automatically clear out or give you some levy as in terms of global or greenhouse gas emission. Now moving ahead, the author says कि it knows how to preserve forest. इसराइल की बात करें तो फॉरेस्ट की प्रिजर्वेशन में भी बहुत ज्यादा ध्यान देता है, और उस कारण से वहाँ पे ड्रॉट एंड एरिडिटी होते हुए भी कभी भी एक्सट्रीम वेदर कंडीशन नहीं होता है. दे डोंट हैव टू सफर, और दे डोंट फेस एग्रीकल्चर लॉस फॉर एन ईयर. At the same time, Israel is also developing a laboratory for development of practical solution to the climate crisis. They are not focusing on the theory, rather they are coming up, rather than focusing on devising some practical steps which could be followed by everyone, like the government and the citizenry, in order to improve the conditions of these places. Okay. Now let's look at each step, what the Israeli government is actually doing. So first of all, the Development and Research Institute and the private sector in Israel is the feed of animal protein. पहला जो research institute बन रहा है वो private sector वाले लोग बना रहे हैं Israel में, और वो है animal protein substitute पे, animal protein के alternates पे बात कर रहे हैं, उस पे वो लोग research करेंगे. Product जैसे कि poultry, milk, eggs, इनका ज्यादा से ज्यादा प्रोडक्शन लेबोरेटरीज में होगा, और वो भी इन तरीके से जिसमें कोई ग्रीन हाउस गैस का इमिशन नहीं होता है. इट अलाउज यूज स्वॉथेज ऑफ एग्रीकल्चर लैंड. बहुत बड़े बड़े एग्रीकल्चर लैंड को ये लाइव स्टॉक पर्पसेस के लिए यूज करने देते हैं. उससे होता ये है कि एग्रीकल्चर लैंड का रिस्टोरेशन होता है. यू मस्ट हैव हर्ड ऑफ कि जब एक लैंड पे बहुत बार एग्रीकल्चर किया जाता है तो उसकी जो फर्टिलाइजर, उसकी जो यील्डिंग कैपेसिटी होती है वो कम हो जाती है. उसके जो बेसिक आप कह सकते हो मिनरल्स होते हैं लैंड में, या जो भी उसकी जरूरत है जिसके प्लांट को वो ग्रो कराएगा, वो धीरे धीरे डिप्लीट करने लगता है अगर आप रेगुलर उस पर खेती कर रहे हो, रेगुलर एग्रीकल्चर कर रहे हो. तो इट इज अ वंडरफुल आइडिया कि अगर हम उसमें बीच में स्विच करें, हम 2 साल एग्रीकल्चर करें और फिर 1 साल जस्ट उसके ग्रेजिंग लैंड बना दे, जहां एनिमल आए वो खाए और वो अपने डंग वहीं पे करे, और वो अल्टीमेटली एक्ट करे एज अ फर्टिलाइजर. नाउ point number D is Israel's climate innovation. It provides a solution in the field of compressed air energy storage. Compressed air energy के भी storage के बारे में हम बात कर सकते हैं, वो भी एक अच्छा alternate होगा अगर हम कोई ऐसी non renewable और ऐसी कोई renewable energy sources लाते हैं जिसको हम compress करके या फिर air energy storage के तर्ज पे भी हम कुछ ऐसा develop कर सकते हैं, which will also deal with, or which will also help us in dealing with this problem, and that's what Israel is also doing in a way. Finally, the author says कि energy generation from sea waves का use करना to generate energy, और advanced computing tools का use करना energy को manage करने के लिए is also imperative and is also being done by the Israeli government. So ultimately, India can take steps from it. And lastly, the author suggests कि Israel and India can lead the way to establish a state of art solution. अगर ये दोनों country मिल जाए तो ये लोग ऐसा state of art solution निकाल देंगे इस पूरे global warming के situation का, greenhouse gas emission का, for the developing world. जो developing world है इनके लिए अल्टीमेटली उसका पर्पस होगा कि जो इम्पैक्ट है क्लाइमेट चेंजेस का उनको कम से कम करना, उनको मिनिमाइज करना. सो दैट इज व्हाट द ऑथर इज सजेस्टिंग कि इंडिया शुड at least ask for help from Israel. India should take Israel's model into picture, into consideration when devising their own point of view or devising their own blueprint. But author is also suggesting that India should go one step ahead. India should directly invite, or India should go to the place itself where they can start a dialogue or negotiation with Israel government, and they can work on establishing a similar kind of a system in India as well. Okay, with that, let's move on to the next topic, which is where liberalism and nationalism are placed in Asia. Now, in this topic, the author traces the origin of liberalism and nationalism in Asia. At the same time, the author talks about how these ideas are flourishing currently in this part of the world, and what the people think about, what the people's ideology or point of view about such values or about such principles of liberalism and nationalism. Written by Krishnan Srinivasan, who was also former foreign secretary. The start of the article is very simple. It starts with liberalism and nationalism mean different thing to different people. The idea that liberalism is similar to nationalism would be a false suggestion altogether, because liberalism suggests that we should be liberal in our approach. We should be open to accept all the ideas. We should be open towards foreign nation people. We should be open towards other people's opinion, their own identity, and we cannot have problems with that all the time. It demands tolerance from us, it demands a kind of openness from us. However, on the other hand, nationalism is a totally different kind of an idea, which suggests that a country is run by people, and the people of that country needs to respect the country like it's their own, and they should have legitimate feelings or supporting feelings for their country itself, not for other countries. So that is the origin or genesis of nationalism. Nationalism means simply to love your country or to die for your country. Liberalism means to love liberty or to die for liberty. Now, these words suggest that they are mutually exclusive, or that if one system will be present, then the other automatically gets absent, or automatically starts getting missed out in that scenario. How and why, that what the author tries to answer in this article. So the author starts it with saying कि after 70 years of India's independence, it is worth recalling कि ब्रिटेन ने जो यहाँ पे एम्पायर पूरा का पूरा सेट किया था, इंडिया को अपनी कॉलोनी बनाई थी, वो बनाया था लिबरल फाउंडेशन पे. उनका कहना था कि इंडिया के लोग अभी तक बहुत ज्यादा ऑर्थोडॉक्स है, इंडिया के लोग अभी तक कुछ बहुत ज्यादा डेवलप नहीं कर पाए हैं, तो हम जब वहां जाएंगे हम लिबरल आइडियाज को लेके जाएंगे, हम ऐसी आइडियाज को लेके जाएंगे जो लोगों को प्रोग्रेसिव बनाएगा, जिससे इंडिया का अल्टीमेट डेवलपमेंट हो सकता है. बट ऑथर का कहना है कि लेकिन जो आइडिया है लिबरलिज्म का, ये बहुत ज्यादा मैच नहीं खाता इंडिया या फिर एशिया की किसी कंट्री से. ये आइडिया आया कहां से? तो ये आइडिया आया वर्ल्ड वॉर 2 के बाद से, या फिर आप वर्ल्ड वॉर के बाद से कह सकते हो, जहां पे लगा कंट्रीज को कि वी विल हैव टू बी लिबरल, वी कैन नॉट बी दैट मच इनटॉलरेंट, बिकॉज इनटॉलरेंसी लीड्स टू वर्ल्ड वॉर लाइक सिचुएशन. बट यहां जो ऑथर कह रहा है वो ये पॉइंट है कि लिबरलिज्म ऑफन क्लास्ड विद एंटी कॉलोनियल नेशनलिज्म. जब हम लिबरलिज्म की बात करते हैं, जो कि ब्रिटेन चाहता था इंडिया में एस्टैब्लिश करना, लिबर्टी के आइडिया, वो हमेशा से उल्टा रहा था एंटी कॉलोनियल नेशनलिज्म के, जो हमारे अंदर था. हम लोग क्या थे? हम लोग एंटी कॉलोनी थे, बिकॉज वी वर कॉलोनाइज्ड. एट द सेम टाइम वी वर नेशनलाइज्ड, वी वर नेशनलिस्ट. हाउ सो? बिकॉज पीपल इन आवर कंट्री during the time of our partition or during the time of our independence led their life for the country without even thinking about it. That shows that there was a passion involved there, that shows that there was a kind of love for the country, and which is the idea of nationalism also. But that wouldn't be the case if you become a liberal, because once you become a liberal, you start accepting or you start tolerating most of the things that are happening around the world, which also raises the question that you might have accepted the colony, the status of colony of India as well. You might not have any problem with that as well. So these kind of things give rise to this discussion that which of these ideas are worthy to be followed or worthy to be following. Now, after that, the author also says the greatest material support to anti-colonial movement, अगर सबसे बड़ा सपोर्ट मिला है एंटी कॉलोनियल मूवमेंट को ड्यूरिंग द कोल्ड वॉर, कम फ्रॉम द इलिबरल सोवियत यूनियन. वो आया किससे? तो वो आया सोवियत यूनियन से, जो कंट्री खुद बहुत ज्यादा लिबरल नहीं है, तो कंट्री खुद एक बहुत ही इलिबरल कंट्री है. कैसे? तो when India was trying to deter, or when the countries in Asia were trying to counter this idea of liberty or counter this idea of liberal values, Then at that point of time, Soviet Union stood up as an embankment, as a barrier for US and other developed nations who always wanted to impose the idea of liberty or the idea of personal individual freedom. So India, countries like China, countries like Pakistan, they were not really that much concerned about individual freedom and their human rights and other things. Rather, they were concerned about the anti-colonial notion that they were sharing at that point of time, that whatever happens, they would want to remain a colony of some other country. It is not a white man's responsibility. That's what the suggestion of this author was. Now, later on, the author discusses a cause of war, that how or why the war started, what are the reasons that led to similar or multiple wars that we might have studied in our history classes. First of all, he says कि after the rise of nation state, once the idea of nationalism started grounding in, उसके बाद बहुत सारे nation state पैदा हुए. Germany हुआ, France हुआ, India है, America है, UK है. They all were nation state. They had sovereignty, and that was attributed to the power and expansionist policies of the nation. जो war था, जो इस सब चीज का main कारण था, वो था कि एक तो इन countries के पास बहुत ज़्यादा power आ गया था. Also due to the advent of automatic rifles, automatic guns. At the same time, with the advent of nuclear power, it gone to another level. Second reason was their attitude of expansion. They always wanted to expand their territory. In doing so only, many countries have started warring on other nation. Many countries started encroaching upon the lands of other nation, which was the main cause of war. Now, if we look at the situation in Europe, there also we found nations are always in constant conflict. And if we talk about Japan, their nationalism led to war itself. They led a war, or they entered the World War II, particularly with China. Now, in the early period of last century, अगर हम last century के पहले के टाइम को देखें, उस समय पे नेशनलिज्म को रूट कॉज माना जाता था वॉर का. बिकॉज जब तक आपके अंदर नेशनलिज्म आइडिया नहीं, जब तक आप ये नहीं बोलोगे कि जर्मनी इज द बेस्ट कंट्री इन दिस वर्ल्ड, तब तक आप ये नहीं कह रहे हो, तब तक आपका कोई हेट नहीं दिख रहा है बाकी कंट्रीज को लेके. लेकिन जिस दिन आप ये कहना शुरू कर दिए, जिस दिन आप प्योर फॉर्म में नेशनलिस्ट हो गए कि जर्मनी ही एक अकेली कंट्री है जो सबसे ज्यादा प्योरेस्ट कंट्री है और सबसे ज्यादा स्ट्रॉन्गेस्ट कंट्री और सबसे ज्यादा अच्छी कंट्री है, देन इट विल ऑटोमेटिकली स्टार्ट्स गेटिंग इनटू योर सबकॉन्शियस कि दैट मींस कि अदर कंट्रीज आर नॉट एट पार विद जर्मनी और एट पार विद अदर कंट्री. So this is a disturbing idea if we talk about the side effects or simply the collateral damages that we can have by allowing the idea of nationalism flounder too much. Now, to answer that question, the author also says that nationalism, even though was considered as a root cause of war, but not for Marxists. If we talk about the Marxists, they believe that capitalism was the main source of war because it led to the colonialism. अगर capitalism नहीं होता तो कोई country किसी पे rule नहीं करती, कोई country किसी को colony नहीं बनाती, और अगर वो नहीं होता तो there would have no talks about such a condition right now कि हमें liberal ideas follow करने चाहिए या फिर हमें nationalist idea follow करने चाहिए. Clearly, the author also says कि in Europe, as the national idea spread, जैसे जैसे nationalism spread किया, यूरोप के भी सारी कंट्री अपनी इथनिक ओरिएंटेड हो गई. जर्मनी के लोग जर्मनी से बातें करने लगे, फ्रांस के लोग जस्ट फ्रांस के लोगों को अपना समझने लगे, एंड विच अगेन मेड यूरोप इवन वेरी इलिबरल. इसके बाद यूरोप की भी जो कंडीशन हुई वो एंड अप किया बहुत ज्यादा इलिबरल बनते हुए. सो अकेला उसमें एक्सेप्शन जो था वो था गिउसेppe मज़ीनी, who started this nationalism activism for Italy. So that was one condition or that was one instance जहाँ पे nationalism idea को किसी ने पकड़ के उसका सच में उसका फायदा लिया हो या उससे कुछ benefits derive किए हो. But apart from that, जो general ideas है, जो general हम यहाँ पे बातें कर रहे हैं about the idea of nationalism or about the idea of liberty, that wasn't or that isn't the main issue here that the author is concerned about. Okay, sorry guys. Now let's talk about nationalism or what the greats in our history have said about nationalism or what were their views about nationalism. So if we talk about Rabindranath Tagore, he said that it's a malign ideology. Basically, it makes the countries mechanical and soulless. When you start believing that only your country is great and only your country is supreme, then you start thinking like in a very mechanical structure. You will start dismissing people from other country, you will start developing xenophobic ideas, and so it basically is not rooted in a goodness, it's not rooted in something logical. It is trying to make a very subjective process kind of objective. At the same time, the Rabindranath Tagore also said that the spirit of the East representing enlightenment values of internationalism and universalism. जो West का idea है, जो nations है West के, वो चाहे अमेरिका हो जाए, वो चाहे US हो जाए, UK हो जाए, कनाडा हो जाए, ये represent करते हैं लिबर्टी के आइडिया को, इनके हिसाब से लिबर्टी इज द ग्रेटेस्ट वैल्यू, इनके हिसाब से नेशनलिज्म इज अ वैल्यू, और नेशनलिज्म इज द ओनली वैल्यू which one should have in their heart, because it will further strengthen your country. But that makes one soulless, that makes one mechanical. How it can? Just imagine a person in love with any country, let's say Pakistani who is in love with Pakistan, and if he comes to India, he starts or having problems with Indian people or with the culture in India and with every other thing. So that kind of a notion will only emerge if you start loving something irrationally, or if you start loving something without any reason whatsoever. Just because you are a person from that place does not mean that you need to be xenophobic about it. So now the author also mentions about Vinayak Damodar Savarkar, and about him the author says he thought that our country should be ruled by Hindutva nationalism. Our country should have this idea as the overpowering idea, which is Hindutva nationalism. He regarded Buddha's universalism as a some weakening thing. He thought कि अगर बुद्धा ने जो universalism लाया कि आप कोई country के नहीं है, कोई जगह के नहीं, कोई समुदाय के नहीं, everyone is equal, and he spread this knowledge everywhere. इसलिए हम देखते हैं कि बुद्धा is widely regarded everywhere in this world. But according to Vinay Damodar Savarkar, Buddha was not such great of a deal, because according to him, he weakened Indian patriotism. He weakened Indian patriotism by advancing non-violence, or by advancing this idea of universalism, this idea of not falling in love with just the country of your origin. After that, if we talk about Jawaharlal Nehru, his idea of nationalism was a very pragmatic one. He said that the main focus should be independence movement. The main focus here, his main focus rather, was on independence movement, because that was the time when we were struggling with Britishers, when we were struggling to get out the clutches of Britishers. And during that time, he said that in Asia, in the region Asia, the strongest urge is the anti-colonial urge. ये जो urge है वो बस है कि colonies को कैसे भी खत्म करना है, and the positive side of it is nationalism. और इसलिए अगर उसके लिए nationalism लाया भी गया तो there is no problem. अगर कुछ लोग nationalist हो गए just because कि वो अपनी country को support करना चाहते हैं, does not mean that was a problematic thing. That's Jawaharlal Nehru's statement. At the same time, he has a fear also. His fear was that extreme nationalism along colonized people would degenerate into fascism and expansionism. अगर हम extreme nationalism allow करते हैं, जहाँ पे एक आदमी just क्योंकि हिंदुस्तान में पैदा हुआ उसको बस हिंदुस्तान से मतलब है, वो बस हिंदुस्तान के बारे में सोचता है, तो उससे होगा ये कि धीरे धीरे हम उन लोगों में एक वाइल्ड माइंडसेट क्रिएट करेंगे, एक ऐसा माइंडसेट क्रिएट करेंगे जहाँ पे वो बाकी कंट्री के लोगों को अपनी तरह ट्रीट भी नहीं करेंगे और ना ही उन्हें एट पार समझेंगे, और जो कभी ना कभी दिखना है उनके अप्रोच में भी, which will further then give us a chance, or give the people a chance and opportunity to call us, or generally the population there, xenophobic, or someone who hates people from other nation, who hates people from other constituency. Okay. Now the author gives us comes to the final point, which is how the current regime is taking up or thinking about nationalism. The current regime, according to the author, harks back to the thinking of Savarkar and M.S. Golwalkar. According to the author, it is very much related to, or very much on the same basis of what Savarkar and M.S. Golwalkar had. Now, the author also says that it is representing India's cultural nationalism. Ye represent karta hai because of the diversity and every other thing. India का cultural nationalism, and at the same time attempting an impossible balance between the projection of hard power and promotion of peace. अब ये सारी चीजें problematic इसलिए है हमारी country के लिए because the current regime, the government in power, they are trying to establish a balance. They are trying to say we are hard power also, we can retaliate, we can advance into any country, we can do surgical strikes, but we also want peace. So there seems to be some conflicts in the ideas, or in the mindset of these people. But then again, or the author rather, but then again, it's when we talk about some general ideas, it is bound to be very subjective. Everybody will have different notion. Now the author moves on to the last point, which is the contrast between nationalism and liberalism. We shouldn't get confused between these two terms. They are totally different. The first term, nationalism, means, or it simply says, it may take various form. The nationalism may take various form. There is no particular domain where the nationalism will always move towards. So for example, people from India can be nationalist, and their nationalism can be totally related to Hindutva. However, people in Germany during the World War II were also nationalists, but their nationalism was related to the ethnic or to the ethnic identity that they shared at that point of time, or to the race of, or to the Aryan race that you might have heard of. So this way, we cannot judge or we cannot have an exhaustive list ki how a liberal or a nationalist democracy is going to go, but it takes various shape. But if we talk about in general, so essentially it is a collective identity. It gives all the individual an identity कि आप कहीं भी जाके बोल सकते हो कि I belong to this country, or my country of origin is this, and that is why I'm Indian, and that's why I love my country. So these kind of arguments become very prevalent when you have strong notion of nationalism around you. The second idea is liberalism. Liberalism, which basically promotes the idea of liberty, the idea of autonomy, the idea of individual freedom and self-determination. And about this, the author says, liberalism, it is implied from the word itself, but to make it clear, it says कि it is defense of individual freedom. Liberalism जो होता है वो हर आदमी के freedom का defense है, हर आदमी का freedom को बचाने के लिए लाया गया है, and हर आदमी का right है कि वो self को determine करे what they want to be, what they want to do, everything. Secondly बोलता है state का role in order to protect the private sphere. State का role बस इतना है कि वो जो भी private लोग हैं, जो भी citizenry है, जो private sphere है, उसमें वो protection provide करे, वहाँ पे किसी के भी right का हनन नहीं हो, किसी की भी राइट जो है वो इन्फ्रिंज नहीं की जाए. At the same time, the author mentions कि if let's say this is the idea, if let's say liberalism becomes the idea, so it can underpin universal rights. The side effects, or rather the effects of liberalism is कि it can underpin universal rights, and it can also trigger Adam Smith's natural law of economics, which demands that it should be a laissez-faire system. The government should interfere the least in the running of the economy. So these kind of things can be beneficial or boon for the society, but at the same time it has certain drawbacks as well. And the drawback is that the idea of liberalism appeal mainly to only the professional educated class and lacks nationalism emotional appeal. आप अगर भारत माता की बात करो, आप देश की बात करो, तो it will connect to almost everyone. But अगर आप बात करो human rights की, अगर आप बात करो prisoner के right की, which is an idea of liberty, then it might not get connected with everyone. Other people might start thinking that you are someone who is pro offenses, pro crime, pro criminals, and that isn't the case. Now let's talk about the story of Asian democracy. If we talk about what is happening in India, so in India, the democracy or the economy or the political structure here rather take this matter totally differently. Here, when the economy is booming, the politics becomes more conservative. जैसे आप सिंगापुर में देखते हैं, चाइना में देखते हैं, वियतनाम में देखते हैं, जैसे जैसे उनकी इकोनॉमी बढ़ रही है, कंट्री जो है वो और ज्यादा दबता जा रहा है, या फिर वहाँ की गवर्नमेंट जो है वो और ज्यादा ऑटोक्रेटिक होती जा रही है, और ज्यादा मोनार्कियल होती जा रही है. सेकेंडली, द एशियन फाइनेंशियल क्राइसिस ऑफ 1997, जब भी फाइनेंस खराब होता है, इकोनॉमिक हमारा खराब होता है, उसके बाद डेमोक्रेटिक इम्पल्सेस आते हैं. उसके बाद बहुत सारी कंट्री में हमने देखा है कि डेमोक्रेसी भी एस्टैब्लिश हुई, ताइवान, साउथ कोरिया एंड थाईलैंड बीइंग सम एग्जांपल्स. नाउ सो नोशन हियर इज कि डेमोक्रेसी अगर हम बात करें तो यहाँ पे जस्ट लाइक वेस्ट एशिया में डेमोक्रेसी इस बात पे नहीं होता है कि वेदर द कंट्री इज लिबरल और नॉट. इवन चाइना इज डेमोक्रेट, South Korea is a democratic country, Indonesia is a democratic country, still, or Singapore and Vietnam are also democratic country, still they are, or they don't have that much to offer in terms of when we talk about the idea of nationalism, in talk of or how the liberal, or how simply adopting the liberal ideas can help this. So we are seeing a pattern here. Whenever the finances goes down, the country becomes more of laissez-faire kind of a system. The country opens up its market, the country or the state does not interfere that much into the market. But when it is not so, when the economy is booming, the state starts interfering. The author then goes on to say कि the centrality of civil and political right, it might be the case with US and UK that for them it is, or the civil or political right is the central idea. In India or in other countries in Asia, that isn't the case. In India, people are very readily accept this idea of losing or sacrificing their autonomy, sacrificing their personal liberty. So democracy in Asia is not saved by liberalism of the West. It is wrong. It would be wrong or false to suggest that in India or in other nation in Asia also democracy only flourishes because the idea of liberty is going on. The idea of liberty is very limited or very restricted here. The degree of state intervention considered accepted when it comes to individual autonomy. State का intervention जो है वो भी acceptable हो जाता है जब हम बात करते हैं लोगों के privacy से, उनके autonomy से बात करने के लिए. तो यहाँ एशिया के देशों में लोगों को प्रॉब्लम नहीं है इफ दे हैव टू गो थ्रू एक्स्ट्रा स्टेप्स जस्ट टू गेट ऑन अ बस और जस्ट टू गेट ऑन a train. They don't even mind if the police seizes them, if the police start committing or starts searching them overall, because they don't feel कि it's a attack on their autonomy, it's an attack on their privacy. Rather they understand it, or rather they take it in a way the government is free to do that, and so it's okay if they ever do such a thing. We are not going to react or retaliate against it. But if the same would have happened in US and America, US and UK, you know, there the idea of liberty is so empowering or so overwhelming that everybody would have gone onto the roads in order to protest against it. Now, if we talk about liberalism and the criticism of it in the modern world, so it is attacked now. It has been attacked by West and in East also. In the West, if we talk about both far right and the left, has started to abuse it. डोनाल्ड ट्रंप ने इस आइडिया ऑफ लिबर्टी के बारे में बहुत सारा कुछ कहा, उन्होंने इसको पूरी तरह से इम्पीड भी किया, उसको ऑब्स्ट्रक्ट भी किया. एंड सिमिलरली बर्नी सैंडर्स जो कि लेफ्ट से है, अकॉर्डिंग टू हिम आल्सो, जस्ट बाय अलाउइंग लिबर्टी और जस्ट बाय हैविंग more consolidated approach in dealing with liberty is not going to solve the problem. After that, it also says that there never have been community of mutually supportive liberal democracy. ऐसा कोई बहुत ज़्यादा ऐसी डेमोक्रेसीज नहीं आई हैं अपने दुनिया में जहाँ पे बहुत सारी ऐसी कंट्रीज हो जो लिबरल हो और वो सब एक साथ में कोहेजन से रहती हैं. जो लार्जेस्ट ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है वो यूरोपियन यूनियन है, बट उसमें भी अब देखते हैं हर दिन बिटवीन स्टेट्स और बिटवीन मेंबर स्टेट्स प्रॉब्लम्स होते रहते हैं. नाउ द रिफॉर्म ऑफ यूएन टू इंक्लूड इंडिया, जापान, जर्मनी. अब यहाँ पे ऑथर बोल रहे हैं कि और क्या क्या प्रॉब्लम्स है. तो दो वी टॉक अबाउट लिबरलिज्म एंड नेशनलिज्म, बट व्हेन वी टॉक अबाउट दैट इंडिया, जापान एंड जर्मनी लाइक कंट्री नीड्स टू बी परमानेंट मेंबर ऑफ द सिक्योरिटी काउंसिल, इट बिकम्स सो डिफिकल्ट. नो अदर कंट्रीज एक्सेप्ट्स इट. जो अभी की कंट्री है वो नहीं अलाउ करते हैं इनको बनने देना. तो इट शोज कि the general idea of even the West is not liberty. They just espouse it, they just abide by it in order to create some kind of impression. Now, will nationalism or liberalism be reflected in future Asia? Countries like India, China, they are not going to show, or they are not going to adhere to the principle of liberty. The principles that they adhere by is the principle of sovereignty, territorial integrity, and non-interference. This implies the rejection of Western effort. This also implies that India, China, and countries alike, they are not going to simply accept the US version of political structure or UK's version of political structure. Rather, they are going to devise their own method, devise their own plan and step of action, and that's what they might be following. Now, author in the end says that there is no talk of Asian nationalism. If we really want to change this predicament, if we want to come out of this, we'll have to start talking about Asian nationalism. जब तक हमारे एशिया में nationalism नहीं होगा, हम अपने आपस में nationalism नहीं ला सकते हैं. We cannot start thinking about the whole world. We cannot then go on targeting the whole world. So first of all, we need to make a case where we start talking about Asian nationalism rather than country-specific nationalism. But that also is a long shot because of the current existing rivalry between China and India, and which makes the desirable outcome a very remote prospect. It leaves the point whether it can ever happen or not. Now, this is coming on to the last topic, which says no offense of rash driving if pedestrian was hit while not using zebra crossing. Zebra crossing यहाँ हुआ ये, शर्मिन हकीम ने लिखा है ये आर्टिकल. यहाँ हुआ ये कि एक आदमी, एक बाइक से जा रहा था ईस्टर्न एक्सप्रेस हाईवे पे, और वहाँ एक औरत बिना zebra crossing के ही उसने रोड क्रॉस करने की कोशिश की. वहाँ उस आदमी की बाइक की स्पीड इतनी थी कि वो कंट्रोल नहीं कर सका और उसने धक्के मार दिए, और उसके एक्सीडेंट से उस लेडी का वहीं पे मौत हो गया. ये आदमी क्योंकि भीड़ थी वहां पे, एक्सप्रेस हाईवे था, ये भी वहां रुका नहीं, ये आगे बढ़ता चला गया. इसके खिलाफ 3 केसेस 3 सेक्शन के अंदर फाइल किए गए, सेक्शन 279, 304A ऑफ आईपीसी एंड सेक्शन 134 ऑफ मोटर व्हीकल एक्ट. इस केस में अक्यूज्ड को मुंबई हाई कोर्ट ने बरी कर दिया, क्विट कर दिया, इस बेसिस पे कि अगर जीब्रा क्रॉसिंग नहीं था एंड द वुमन वाज क्रॉसिंग द रोड, वी कैन नॉट से दैट द अक्यूज्ड वाज बीइंग नेग्लिजेंट. द अक्यूज्ड वाज ड्राइविंग ऑल राइट ओनली, but it just appeared that the woman was not paying attention to the signs there, or she was walking on the road when there was no zebra crossing sign lit or basically available at that. So that's what we need to consider. That was the main reason why he was acquitted. But what are the findings of the court? The court said कि prosecution has failed to establish that accused drove his motor vehicle on a public road. पहला तो ये नहीं आप establish कर पा रहे हो कि accused सच में अपनी motor vehicle को rash और negligent manner में चलाया है, और दूसरा ये नहीं आप कर पा रहे हो कि अगर उसने let's say चलाया है और उससे किसी की जान गई है, तो why no medical assistant and report to the matter to the nearest police station? वहां पे जो उसको कोई मेडिकल असिस्टेंस नहीं दिया गया या फिर मैटर को पुलिस स्टेशन नहीं ले जाया गया, उसके पीछे क्या रीजन हो सकता है? तो कोर्ट का ये कहना है कि the person is wrong in not assisting the victim or not taking her to the medical station, but he cannot be treated guilty for rash and negligent driving under section 304A of IPC, causing death by negligence. What are the laws in point? So section 134A of Motor Vehicle Act is being talked about here, which says the duty of driver in case of accident and injury to a person. 279 says rash driving or riding on a public way. And then finally 304A says causing the death of any person by doing any rash or negligent act not amounting to culpable homicide. Read these three sections in detail. I might have some hypothetical questions for you, all of you. About negligence I believe all of you have already known, but it simply is a breach of a duty of care which result in damage. हमारा कोई भी duty of care में जो breach होता है, that is known as negligence. और अगर उस duty of care के बीच से किसी को चोट पहुंची है, किसी को कोई injury आई है, that is treated as negligence. And I think that's all for today. Thank you for joining in, guys. Don't forget to like the videos, share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel, and we'll meet again tomorrow with new editorials. Till then, don't forget to put your comment also. It helps me in order to gauge the situation, in order to garner more information about how you do like this classes to go on. Okay.